Can you hear me? All right, looks like we are experiencing some connection issues. I'll try to resolve that and be back with my guest in a jiffy. Please stay tuned. apologies for that. That definitely took longer than anticipated and has eaten up most of our time. But we're just going to quickly get into our discussion this morning. We have Iya back on the line with us. Iya, once again, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so quickly, in both cases, in the case of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan and in the case of Engineer Adebayo, both of whom petitioned their respective institutions, their respective public institutions, on allegations of sexual harassment done to them by powerful male figures in these public institutions. In both cases, would you say that justice was seen to have been done?
Thank you so much.
We can hear you just fine. Oh, do you need me to recap the question?
No.
Okay.
I would say that looking for Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan as well as the question is, I think it serves as a quick step as and just interaction. General power center justice matters. And there's need to foster accountability. To speak to your question, I would say that in both cases, we have seen that Natasha's case, the Senate there's a lot of red flags about, its objectivity. And if you're setting up a committee that speaks to allegations of sexual harassment, then it is important that, you rely on the fundamental principles of natural justice. And if you're speaking to natural justice, then you're speaking to fair hearing, you're speaking to fairness. And in both cases, we see that a culture of impunity. And I would even say institutional retaliation. For Senator Natasha, she was suspended. Although the Senate will would want to rely on the fact that, she was suspended based on misconduct. But from the track record, from the information that we had earlier gotten, and even in terms of the allegation that she brought forth, there is a need there was a need for the Senate to be able to handle those allegations in such a way that, it speaks to the issue and not speaking to how the victim will be blamed or speaking to how there's lack of accountability in terms of institutional frameworks or structures. So I think I should highlight that for us at Gender Mobile Initiative, we support the efforts of higher educational institutions, and we've been doing this for 7 years to highlight to strengthen their internal mechanisms, because we see that there's a need for that. The issue in University of Foye, you can see that there's a lot of deficits in terms of their administrative infrastructure that speaks to issues of sexual violations within the institution. So, no, I do not think that the cases were handled well. I do not think that there was a culture of accountability. I believe that it was mishandled. I believe that it wasn't transparent enough. it doesn't speak to accountability, nor does it speak to justice, and it speaks to the systemic failures that we can see all around us, especially, of course, speaking to public institutions now. So yes, I do not think that it was handled accurately.
Several studies have found that sex-based crimes, of which sexual harassment is one of them, are often underreported, as in victims do not come forward. People who have been sexually harassed or even other types of sexual assaults are often reluctant to come forward to formally report what has happened to them because of fear of stigmatization, fear of backlash, fear of being disbelieved, fear of being punished, because of challenges as well with securing a conviction. Even if they bring it forward and they choose to overlook all of these other fears, the chances of them being able to secure a conviction where their assaulter will be punished are slim, and just a general lack of faith in the justice system is what contributes to sex-based crimes or SGBV being underreported. Against this backdrop, with this knowledge in mind, would you say that these two cases, I mean, you started out by saying that they serve as a litmus test for how we're going to handle sexual and gender-based violence of this nature going forward. So against the backdrop of this, would you say that these two cases will inspire or instill faith in other victims of sexual and gender-based violence to come forward and report their abuse because of how they've seen this go down?
Thank you very much, Lola. And to be very honest with you, I would answer this question by first giving a backdrop to the case of University of Hawaii. And the reason I'm doing that is because a report came out. The investigative panel finally brought out a report. And as you know, Gender Mobile has been following up with this case. In fact, we wrote a petition to the ICPC, and we're still following up to see how this petition would be accurately addressed. In the report of the investigative panel, you would see that actually this is a broader systemic issue, because the said victim was asked to apologize within 7 days. And I think the most disturbing part of this entire conversation is the fact that the panel was more interested in why the victim now, Engineer Adebayo, why she was recording the Vice Chancellor. So what I'm trying to say is the panel were more, they were more concerned with the motive behind her recording the audio conversation. And,
rather than the substance of what was in the audio recording.
Yes. Rather than the potential victimization of the victim. And so it tells you that, and let me make this very clear. In law, in the Evidence Act, it is very clear. It says that, let me say it in a layman's term, even if an evidence was obtained illegally, as long as that evidence, as long as the desirability of that evidence outweighs the undesirability, then it is admissible. And regarding this University of Hawaii case, the victim here did not even know that she was recording. So her phone has a default mode. You know, there are phones like that. So it was when they were trying to gather evidence that they found out that her phone had a default setting. And so invariably, her conversation with the Vice Chancellor was being recorded. But even if she recorded that conversation illegally, or she was in the know, she was in the knowledge of it, it is still admissible in evidence. So the fact that the panel were more disturbed about it, instead of seeing how they can adequately safeguard an employee, instead of seeing how they can use that situation to ensure that there are institutional reforms that speak to ethical codes of conduct in University of Foyle, they were more disturbed about how she obtained that. So you can see that there is a problem in terms of how the culture of silence has taken a deep-rooted infrastructure in our society. So there's a need for us to break this culture of silence, and that is why we have to really applaud these women. That is Senator Natasha as well as Engineer Adebayo, because these are courageous women. You can see that the system is already against them, but they were still bold enough, knowing that they have gone through. And I have to say this: that both victims have gone through a lot of trauma. They have gone through victimization. They have gone through humiliation. They have gone through psychological torture. Yes, psychological torture, because it is bad that you bring up a case where you had to go through a certain level of sexual violence, and then it is another thing for the institution that is supposed to protect you, that is supposed to guard you. And let me say this. First of all, in these two cases, you would see that the Senate is part of the legislative arm of this country that are supposed to uphold integrity, right? So it is very important that a legislative structure in this country upholds integrity, because you're speaking to the needs and desires of the entire country. And then in terms of University of Foyle, it is a learning environment. And what do learning environments do? They nurture our character and they nurture learning. They shape us. So you can see that in both situations, these are very important structures within the society. And if these important structures are embedded in victim blaming, embedded, and they are encouraging the culture of silence, the culture of impunity, then there is a long road, there's a long way to go. And if these issues are not addressed judiciously and rightly, at the end of the day, we would have current victims and even potential victims running away from getting support, whether legal, whether psychological, or even social. So we have to address this situation critically, rightly, fairly, so that potential victims do not run away. Because in a situation where alleged perpetrators are being empowered because they're not being sanctioned, we're going to have a very unstable society. So we need to put structures in place. We need accountability systems. We need leaderships that speak to dignity of human beings, fairness, and justice. So, yeah.
Okay, I think we need to simplify things even further and break it down to help people understand the weightiness of these allegations. Because some people say that, women are constantly being flirted with or men make passes at women all the time. So why is it a big deal if the Senate president makes a pass to one of his colleagues? I mean, yes, they're both married, but why is it something that is so damning that it could impugn his name? Or in the case of the vice chancellor and the director of works, Engineer Adebayo, why is it something that could lead to career suicide for him? So some people don't quite understand the power dynamics or power imbalance that makes something that is maybe just sexual advances become inappropriate, become something that is labeled as sexual harassment. So if you could explain that for us in both of these scenarios.
So I think firstly, I would start by explaining what sexual harassment is. Gender Mobile has been working within the sexual harassment space, especially in tertiary educational institutions, for a long time. And what we've come to understand, or part of our learnings, is that a lot of people do not really understand what sexual harassment is. And because our society has normalized a lot of misgivings, so, there are issues that you would raise and they will think that, this doesn't amount to sexual harassment. But breaking it down, what really is sexual harassment? Sexual harassment is any unwelcome sexual behavior, right? It could be advances, it could be conduct, and it could be verbal, it could be non-verbal, and it could be physical. So when you're speaking to the issue of Senator Natasha and Senator Akpabio's remarks to her, I just literally said that sexual harassment could be verbal. It is unwelcome. So any situation that is unwelcome, an unwelcome sexual behavior, whether verbal, whether non-verbal, physical, that initiates, or a place where the environment seems intimidating, hostile, or offensive, then it is sexual harassment. So issues about inappropriate comments or jokes is sexual harassment. You understand? Sexual messages, gestures, that is sexual harassment. And sexual harassment is deeply rooted in power dynamics, as you said. So in the issue of abuse of power or abuse of authority, we can see it in both cases. For Senator Natasha, she alleges that when she declined the sexual advances of Senator Akpabio, he refused to listen to some of the things that she was bringing to the table, almost as if she was demoted, not in words, but in action.
Right.
In the University of Foye case, the lady, the engineer, the victim involved, was demoted because she refused his advances. She was queried, she was sanctioned, she received warning more than 3 times. She was even demoted. She was removed from being Deputy Director of Works and Services and then moved to another department, which was a demotion. So you cannot say that when these power dynamics happen, people or public office holders do not, use their office to contravene another individual's rights. So these are things that exist. And that is why even when we look into the law or we look at the law, the ICPC, we thank God for the ICPC. They are doing a very good work, and Gender Mobile has been in partnership with the ICPC. In fact, we're working with the ICPC regarding the University of Foye case. But if you check the ICPC laws, Section 19 of the ICPC law, it speaks to this issue of gratification or conferring unfair advantage upon oneself or any other person. In fact, Section 22 speaks specifically, it criminalizes any action by a public office holder who uses his position to confer corrupt or unfair advantage on themselves or their relatives or associates. So So you can see that even the law understands that when it comes to issues on sexual harassment, there's a power dynamic. And because there's a power dynamic, people would want to use their own advantage. Now, let me tell you, let me leave, all these sections that I'm quoting and all that, and let me simplify this issue by giving you a true scenario that happened in this the University of Foye case. The victim, after the panel was set up, the victim was sent a notice or a letter that they were going to sit on so and so day. The panel decided to sit in Abuja, an incident that happened in Ekiti. The panel decided to sit in Abuja. On the third day, this lady got to the third venue and realized that the venue had changed and nobody communicated this to her. She picked up her phone and called some members of the committee that she had their numbers, and their numbers were all switched off. She had to contact a third party who then told her where the meeting was actually going to hold. And the person now told her that they were going to send a vehicle to take her to the said venue. Now, this raises the issue of even safeguarding victims and survivors. Why would she enter a vehicle that is unassigned, or we don't know where the venue is going to be? We'll just put the victim in that. There was risk.
Right.
So we decided that it was important for us to follow the vehicle. So we'll put her in our vehicle, and then we follow that said vehicle to the venue. We got to the venue, and they rejected her lawyer from entering into the room. They said that there was no need for a lawyer because this is just an administrative panel, blah, blah, blah. But I tell you this, the alleged perpetrator, that's the vice chancellor, was allowed to go in with his aides. So can you see that we're speaking on how this power play or this power dynamic can be very dangerous? He was allowed to go in with his aides, and this woman's lawyer was rejected from entering into that room,
showing preferential treatment for the alleged perpetrator.
Yes, exactly. So this really happened. So you can see that there's a serious issue of partiality. I don't know. There's a serious need to check institutional complacency, because when we were checking this whole situation in the University of Foye, we then realized that there were previous incidents, and the perpetrators or the alleged perpetrators would often receive minimal disciplinary action, while the victims would be left without any form of justice.
That's even if they are found guilty.
Yes. So the system is very corrupt, and the system actually discourages other victims from coming out. So when we see victims come out and speak to these issues, we really have to applaud them and give them all the necessary support. Because at the end of the day, you can see that, there are a lot of forces against rather than with. But I would say this, that again, I'll reiterate the need for institutional accountability and systemic reform, because that is the only way that we are going to see a robust preventative measures being taken against sexual harassment or against any form of sexual violation within our public institutions.
But isn't it a catch-22 situation? That's not the question I was going to ask. But now that you've brought it up, institutional accountability and systemic reform, when the public institutions themselves that are often supposed to play a critical role in the kind of reform we need to take allegations of sexual harassment seriously, are themselves indicted. So how can the Senate, the National Assembly, the highest lawmaking body in the nation, if it is seen to not have handled the matter transparently and fairly, how then can we even begin a conversation about changing the system, reforming the system to better dispense justice to victims of sexual harassment and other sex-based crimes?
To be very honest with you, Lola, I think that the fight to ensuring that the system works for us is a long way to go. There's a long way to go. But then we still have our legal reforms and policies in place. And sometimes the truth is that the system can use those policies, rightly formed policies, to its advantage. But the truth is that we can't give up. We have to do the right thing. And we have to keep the fight going. So that is why even, when speaking to these issues of justice, these issues of the system, these issues of institutional reform, I would only say that we have to arm ourselves with the knowledge and understanding. And we have to ensure that we have really strong policies in place so that even when the system looks like it is against us, you can find something to hold it to account. Using this Natasha's case, when they wanted to recall her, there are specific guidelines that the INEC have to follow. And you can see that because those guidelines were not followed, and also because this case is actually in the court of public opinion. By the way, this is the time for me to say, this is why we're having these conversations, and this is why we are grateful to the media and our civil society organizations who keep speaking to these issues and keep spotlighting these issues. The truth is that even when the system wants to, play a certain game, because these conversations are put out in the court of public opinion, it gives a leeway for these people to ensure that, or it gives an open ground, or it highlights these issues in such a way that there's a degree to which they can go. And so I think that it is important for us to keep sticking to the issues. It is important for us to ensure that we put out our grievances, we put out our concerns to the public. It is important that we tell them that there's a need for the implementation of preventative measures, and not only preventative measures, but that there's, institutional accountability framework. And then also that every important stakeholder ensures that there is fairness, ensures that there is justice in whatever they do. We have to ensure that there's no longer procedural lapses. or attempts to shield anybody. Everything should be brought to light. Everything should be done according to the book. So I would say that everybody has a role to play. And if there's a call to action, the call to the action would be that we have to stop this culture of silence and this culture of victim blaming, and ensure that we are transparent. As a people, there's a need for us to be accountable to each other. There's a need for us to be proactive bystanders. How do you accomplish this? You have to see it from a place where it is not just this person's problem. It is a collective problem. And if there's a collective problem, we have to ensure that we handle it as a collective. So, to be very honest with you, the road really looks narrow, and the possibilities look very, very short-sighted, or rather long-sighted. But at the end of the day, I think that what we're doing right here, right now, speaking to these issues, educating people about it, so they're knowledgeable, and then there's agency coming from each of us. I feel like that is a long way for us to ensure, productivity in terms of ensuring and safeguarding our public institutions against sexual violation.
All right. Our guest is Iya Bawa Pyiki, Esq. She's Partnerships and Compliance Lead at Gender Mobile Initiative, an NGO that specializes in research and advocacy on sexual and gender-based violence. They are one of many CSOs that came together to submit a petition to the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, to investigate the sexual harassment allegation leveled against the Vice Chancellor of Federal University Oye Ekiti by the Director of Works, Engineer Folashade Adebayo. And I told you the details. I shared the details of that allegation with you at the beginning of the show, but maybe I'll recap later on, because there's just so much about that case that just leaves an unpleasant taste in one's mouth. But we're back on WhatsApp. However, it is not to the WhatsApp line that you know. We have a new WhatsApp number, so please channel your messages to this new number. It's 0705 050 1067. To talk to us on WhatsApp, send a message to 0705 050 1067. Okay? The former line is inactive. So your messages on WhatsApp should strictly be sent to 0705 050 1067. Facebook and X still remain the same. We're talking this morning about sexual harassment allegations in our public institutions. I do not need to remind you of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan's travails as she went against the Nigerian Senate, specifically the Senate President. But it did seem like, there was a seeming closing of ranks even among the other senators. And that is not to mention all the other things that happened, the protests against her, the protests showing solidarity to the Senate President, the attempt to recall her. And all of this can seemingly be traced to her revelation that the Senate President allegedly sexually harassed her. So before we get to the phone lines, we have a commercial break coming up, but before we get to the phone lines, in as much as there is a similarity, there's a lot of similarities between Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan's case and that of Engineer Folashade Adebayo. But there is some difference. In the case of Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan, the case never even made it to the stage of presenting evidence of any kind. It was simply her narrating what happened to her, the Senate President refuting it, and then everyone giving their opinion on it. And all the other things we saw that unfolded. But in the case of Engineer Folashade, some of the evidence was made public. There's actually a recording, the audio recording that we have referenced is in the public space. It was picked up by several newspapers. Any curious person can simply go look it up, where the Vice Chancellor allegedly made these remarks. And I've read transcripts of that audio recording where, the Vice Chancellor was alleged to have said, "Just make me happy, Shade. Listen, I beg you in the name of God, make me happy, I will make you happy. I won't say more than that." And to anyone, this is just one part. If you listen to it within the context of everything else that was said, it's pretty clear that someone is making sexual advances to another person. Now, what is left to determine is whether the people in that audio, if an investigation is to be done correctly, is whether the people in that audio recording are actually the Vice Chancellor and Engineer Adebayo. However, the investigative panel admitted not only did it not make its findings public after the 9-man panel that it constituted in February probed the matter, it did not make its findings public. It did not tell us how it arrived at these conclusions and resolutions that it has now shared. It also admitted that it did not subject this audio recording to a forensic evaluation, which you would think would be the next step, because all that's left to do is to authenticate whether truly the people talking there are actually the people alleged to be involved in this crime. It did not do that. And then even more concerning, or just as concerning, is the fact that the Vice Chancellor remained in office throughout the investigation. And that is in breach of the university's rules and practices, which prescribes suspension for any staff member accused of sexual harassment in order for a fair probe to take place. So the Foye case differs from the National Assembly one because there's a lot more evidence in this instance, which is even something of a miracle, because sexual harassment cases are often, you explained how the recording was gotten. The victim did not even know that it was recording. So it was just happenstance that there was a recording to corroborate what was said, because otherwise it would just be someone's version of things versus another person. So when you have this much incriminating evidence and yet it is not enough to secure a conviction in spite of legislation that prescribes how it is to be done, then what will it take for victims of sexual and gender-based violence to get justice? Are you there?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last bit of what you said.
Yes, I was saying that considering the overwhelming and incriminating or damning evidence in the case of the Foye Vice Chancellor, specifically the recording and its transcript, considering that was not enough to get justice for the victim, what will it take for victims of SGBV to get justice served? What
will it take for? So, what will it take for what? Sorry.
For victims of sex-based crimes to get the justice they deserve.
Okay. So, from the background of this very disturbing case with the Vice Chancellor and the victim, Engineer Adebayo, you can see that it was, unequivocally captured that the Vice Chancellor coerced or was trying to coerce her to engage in illicit sexual relationship. And just as you pointed out, it was detailed by the audio messages that were recorded. It's quite unfortunate that this investigative committee that was put up would sit sometime in January. I just want to give a background so people understand this better. Would sit sometime in January. And from their constitution, when a sitting like that occurs, you're supposed to transmit a report within 3 weeks. So they did not transmit the results within 3 weeks. But just as the 3 weeks was about to elapse, they sent a message saying that they needed another 3 weeks. And the final report came out on the 8th. On the 8th was Monday. On the 8th was or Tuesday rather. It came out on the 8th around 11 p.m. And from the report, the committee completely relied on the investigation of the Nigerian police force. And they, of course, condemned the recording, as I earlier spoke to.
Right.
They condemned the recording, saying that it was without the Vice Chancellor's consent and knowledge. And I think what is most disturbing about this issue with the recording was that the committee said that she was using the recording
to blackmail the VC.
Blackmail the alleged perpetrator.
Right. Iya, if you could please hold on, just pause. We have a commercial break that we have to take. When we come back, we'll continue with that and take calls. Because of the earlier challenges we had with our connection, it ate into our time, and so we now have to extend a bit. So just please grant us a few more minutes. We'll wrap up this conversation after the commercial break. This is still Panorama on Splash 106.7 FM. Remember, we have a new WhatsApp number. So if you have questions, comments, send them to 0705 050 1067. I'll be back shortly.
Don't dare touch that dial. It's Splash, your integrity station.
Ìrì òwúrọ̀ Jerusalem Jordan. Bí Olúwa ṣe pa láṣẹ fún bàbá testimony wípé kí wọ́n máa lọ gbàdúrà fún onímọ̀júbò ènìyàn ní Jerusalem àti Jọ́dánì.
Bẹ́ẹ̀ni o, látòrí òkè testimony prayer mountain kò tó wá sẹ́rù Abẹ́òkúta ní Nàìjíríà la ó ti máa gbàdúrà. Bá a ṣe ń gbéra ìrìn àjò mímọ́ lọ sí Jerusalem àti Jọ́dánì. Àṣẹ Olúwa ni lóòótọ́ o. Àwọn tó ti ń bá wòlíì Ọlọ́run Prophet Dr. Akande Adéọlá bàbá testimony ìrìn àjò ẹ̀mí mímọ́ yìí ń ló lè ròyìn. Bí wọ́n ṣe ń gbàdúrà gbàrí sí ayọ̀ kíákíá. Láwọn ibi tó ṣe kókó tó dárúkọ nínú Bíbélì. Láwọn ẹ̀rí kọ́ngbẹ́kọ́ngbẹ́ tó fojú hàn sí ìjáde gbangba gbogbo ìgbà. Gbọ́ irú ogun wo ló ń jà tí ó fẹ́? Àwọn ìlàkọjá wo ló ní tí ó fẹ́ lọ́kàn balẹ̀? Ó yá jájọ lọ gbàdúrà ní Jerusalem àti Jọ́dánì pẹ̀lú bàbá testimony kó wọ́n ṣẹ́. Hotel accommodation ibi tó rẹwà la máa dé sí. Bẹ́ẹ̀ la máa jẹ oúnjẹ mẹ́ta lójúmọ́. Ó ti yá báyìí ẹ̀ tètè máa bọ̀ wá gba fọ́ọ̀mù kẹ́ forúkọ sílẹ̀ 0902-845-5553 tàbí 081-7577-0000.
A ti fẹ́ ṣe o. Ọjọ́ ti pé tá a máa ṣe. Ó yá gbogbo ẹ̀yin olùgbé Òkè Mọ̀sán, Ládẹrin àti gbogbo agbègbè tó yíká. Ẹ kú àmójúbà ilé oúnjẹ tuntun tí Meduteni Olúwa Foods gbé kalẹ̀ lọ́nà àrà. Sókè Mọ̀sán. Ọ̀pọ̀ ti sún finally torí onírúurú oúnjẹ tilẹ̀ yìí àti tòkè òkun. Ilé oúnjẹ Meduteni Olúwa máa fi tẹ̀yìn lọ́rùn dọ́ba. Ìyẹn lókè Mọ̀sán. Ẹ̀yin ní ẹ̀jẹ̀ àjọ kà. Ó kọjọ́ mélòó báyìí tá a máa ṣe. Ṣé ẹ fẹ́ gbọ́ ọjọ́ Friday April 18 gangan bẹ̀rẹ̀ láago 2 ọ̀sán. Láyẹyẹ ṣíṣí ilé oúnjẹ tuntun míì tí Meduteni Olúwa ṣí sí MKO Trade Fair Complex beside Immigration Office Òkè Mọ̀sán Abẹ́òkúta. Ìlàjì péré nínú owó oúnjẹ tí ẹ bá rà lọ́jọ́ yẹn. Ẹ máa sanwó ẹ̀ ọ̀kan òjọ̀kan ní ìgbádùn tó wà nílẹ̀ fún gbogbo àwọn oníbàárà tán bá tètè dé. Ọjọ́ yẹn máa dùn gan ni. Ọmọ tán sọ ìràwọ̀ ńlá number 1 Aláyọ̀ Melody Singer tó máa lùlù àlùjọ.
Àtàndá ló kọrin ọba Aláyọ̀ Singer o. Àtàndá ló kọrin ọba the global legend. Máa bá ṣẹrẹ lọ.
Meduteni Olúwa Foods, dishing out the best considering your budget.
We are ultimate landmark schools. For a top-notch learning experience. We have qualified professionals, state-of-the-art facilities to make learning beautiful. We are ultimate. We are ultimate. We are ultimate landmark schools.
Ultimate Ultimate Landmark Schools. Ètò ìgbaniwọlé ń lọ lọ́wọ́ sí kindergarten, nursery, primary, college àti ẹ̀kọ́ ìmọ̀ iṣẹ́ ọwọ́ vocational skills acquisition. Ní yàrá ìkàwé tó dára, computer room, science laboratory, music department tó gbàgbàmù, library tó dúró déédéé, ibi ìṣeré ìdárayá, ọkọ̀ ilé ìwé wà, boarding facilities náà gbẹ̀yìn. Àwọn ọmọ wa sì ń ṣe dáadáa nínú ìdánwò UTME. We are WAEC NECO government approved. Ìdánwò common entrance máa wáyé ní May 24, June 28 àti July 19, 2025. Ultimate Landmark Schools wà ní Láfẹ̀nwá Abẹ́òkúta Ògùn State àti ní Blessed River Basin Estate, Àdéhùn Abẹ́òkúta Ògùn State. Telephone 0803-536-8194 tàbí 0813-642-7488. Ultimate Landmark School. In God we trust.
Follow who know road, they say. That's why I always stay close to Auntie Bola. Recently, she's been talking about something big. Esq.Step.
With Esq.Step, I have received intensive training in STEM education, which is training on how to use science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to solve real-life problems. It is helping our students. Esq.Step is also renovating 8 technical colleges across Ogun State.
Wow, Esq.Step?
Yes, Esq.Step. Ogun State Economic Transformation Project. Beyond education, it is transforming different sectors. In agriculture, over 22,160 farmers have been fully assisted. Its public service reforms have birthed an e-procurement platform for Ogun State. The Ogun State government, through Esq.Step, has also given out 12,000 certificates of occupancy out of the 15,000 targets to businesses and individuals. Esq.Step, improving the economic livelihood of all Ogun.
Ìgbéga ìpínlẹ̀ Ògùn, àjọṣe gbogbo wa ni.
Panorama.
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 Panorama on Splash 106.7 FM.
Welcome back to Panorama on Splash 106.7 FM. We've been talking about sexual harassment within the public institutions in Nigeria. You already know about the sexual harassment claim leveled against the Senate President Godswill Akpabio by Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan. It never quite made it to the stage of investigation. She submitted a petition. It was said to have been improperly filled and thrown out, and then she submitted again, and thereafter, she was suspended. She took her case to the United Nations. We saw all that followed, all that ensued after that. But there's another case that you may not be aware of, and that is the case of the Vice Chancellor of Federal University, Oyekiti, and his Director of Works. She alleged that he had made improper advances to her, sexual advances to her, despite the fact that they are both married and that he's her boss. And he had implied that her granting him the sexual favors he was seeking would grant her some benefits. She would get some benefits in return. And she had declined, reported him. The matter was investigated by the school, and the school claims that the Vice Chancellor is not guilty of the charges. And this is in spite of the fact that there's an audio recording where the Vice Chancellor could clearly be heard propositioning her. That audio recording is available. If you check Premium Times or Foundation for Investigative Journalism or even Sahara Reporters, you'll find the audio recording and the transcript where the Vice Chancellor could be heard propositioning her. But the school, evidently, the governing council did not think that that was enough to indict the VC of sexual harassment, and they've asked her, the victim, to apologize to the Vice Chancellor for recording him without his consent. They've also said they will come up with policies on cyberbullying, use of social media, community and public relations, implying that they think that all of this was a smear campaign or a bullying campaign by the victim towards the alleged perpetrator. They've also advised the Vice Chancellor to be more careful and circumspect in dealing with subordinates, meaning that they are saying that the victim was the one who read too much meaning into things. Well, the whole thing was, it came to a head yesterday when the council made known its resolutions where it exonerated the VC and asked the victim to apologize. But that's what we're talking about this morning. We have been talking to the Partnership and Compliance Lead at Gender Mobile Initiative, an SGBV NGO, Iya Bawa Pyiki, Esq. And before we went on that commercial break, Iya, you were saying something. You were answering my question about if evidence is not enough to secure a conviction, then what is? So please quickly give us your answer to that so we can get to the phone lines.
Yeah, so I was just saying that it's quite obvious that the governing council, consisting of a 9-member investigative panel, did not truly examine the allegations, and the report that they issued just speaks to the lack of it speaks to institutional retaliation. Institutional retaliation because now from their own reporting, we see that the alleged perpetrator again was not indicted, and the victim has been told to apologize within 7 days. She has also, been directed to make that apology in writing. So it has to be a letter of apology to the council who sat on her case. You can also see that instead of admitting the fact that the alleged perpetrator leveraged his administrative powers and institutional influence to ensure that she got a promotion so she could be closer to him in terms of proximity of office now. Instead, the governing council condemned management, just specifically condemning management and not condemning the person that issued the directive is quite laughable. So they condemned management for giving her, preferential treatment, and they ordered the management to backdate her promotion. They also, spoke about using the recordings for blackmail, or to blackmail the alleged perpetrator. That's the Vice Chancellor. They also said, they are going to come up with policies on cyberbullying, and you spoke on that, and the use of social media and whatnot. So this is very. There were so many other
directives,
conclusions or directives that they came to. But I would say that in all of this, this is a very harmful and dangerous precedent being set. The risks of coming out, whether being a victim or survivor, the risks of actually coming out to speak to an event that has to do with sexual allegations. If you look at it closely, you'll see that it really outweighs any supposed benefits that you get. Engineer Adebayo would not put herself in front of a line where she knows that she will be burned, when she knows that when she outweighs the outcome, it might be against her. But the truth is that we didn't know that the Governing Council of Federal University, FOIE, Federal University Ayo-Ekiti, would this very dangerous conclusion. Dangerous because, again, I see that if these cases are not handled, and we have been working within higher educational institutions for years now.
Right.
And that is why the right channels, the right systems need to be in place.
Okay.
And that is why it was very important and such a great mark that the Federal Ministry of Education passed or approved the model anti-sexual harassment policy for higher educational institutions in 2023. I tell you this, Lola, a lot of educational institutions in this country are not even aware of this model policy. We have worked with 23 states in Nigeria and still counting, and we have signed MOUs with over 130 institutions. In that 130 institutions, I kid you, I don't think 20% were even aware of the approval of the model anti-sexual harassment policies for higher educational institutions by the Federal Ministry of Education. So it tells you that there is a lot of work that needs to be done. I think that my time is up because you're trying to get my attention.
Right, yes,
So
yes, we have to get to the phone lines. Okay, all right. Well, you can call in now to the program. You can call the phone lines. Call the number 0705 050 1067, which is now our new WhatsApp line. So for WhatsApp, send your message to 0705 050 1067. I know it will take some getting used to, but that's how to reach us on WhatsApp. To comment on our Facebook live stream, go to our page, Splash FM 106.7. To tweet at us, tag at Splash FM 1067 on X. Our topic this morning, the issue under review is sexual harassment in public institutions, and we have detailed the stories that inspire this conversation. You can call 0705 050 1067, or you can call 0817 444 1067. You can drop us a message on WhatsApp, 0705 050 1067 is the WhatsApp line. On WhatsApp, we have this comment from Olufemi Odushino from Abiola Way, who says, imagine victims should apologize. Sexual harassment has spread from the FCT to Oye-Ekiti and may soon spread across the whole country if it is not curbed. Now, like this, banditry takes start. Oh, what a rotten country. King David says, I can't believe this is happening in my dear country. I really feel ashamed to be a Nigerian right now. Unfortunately, this is another form of corruption politicians are happy to throw at us, just like how they embezzle. This is shameful, he says. On Facebook, Akorede Camille Adebayo says, will the guest advise Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan to approach the court regarding her sexual harassment allegation against Akpabio instead of filing a petition? Let's talk about that. Choosing to take it through the courts. Do you think that perhaps that is a more effective way to get justice than going through the, resorting to the public institutions that they are members of?
Okay, so let me start by highlighting this. It is very important for Senator Natasha to follow all due processes, especially when already you know that the system might be against you. So you have to make sure that you put your home right and well. So bringing the petition to the Senate was the right thing to do. That is the first place of call. So it was important that she sent a petition there. And I just want to inform the viewer, the person that sent the message, that she's actually in court and they're seeing this to the very end. So she's actually in court.
All right, we have more comments. This one is from Mr. Alani from Ewang State, who says, on the issue of discourse this morning, in my opinion, these two scenarios are a bit different. While Engineer Adebayo was able to come up with verifiable evidence, Senator Akpoti Uduaghan was not. As for me, I think Engineer Adebayo has a very good case, and she only needs to push this through the Minister of Education and a competent court of law. Senator Akpoti Uduaghan's case is an embarrassment to our country when she took it to Interparliamentary Union with no substantive evidence to prove her case. The worst part of it is that she was...
Let me quickly jump in here.
I can't say this because it's not true. What do you mean by she's a serial false accuser? Who are the other proven false allegations? The people she has falsely accused of sexual harassment.
Lola,
I would not like to dwell on Senator Akpoti Uduaghan's false sexual harassment allegations until she can prove the same, he says. But regarding Engineer Adebayo, I sincerely sympathize with her, and I urge her to press this further through the Minister of Education to intervene in her matter. And if there's no result, then she should press on via a court of law. 0705 050 1067 is the number to call, or you can call 0817 444 1067. Let's take maybe 2 calls before we wrap up this segment. This message on WhatsApp says, let me see. Okay. All right. So as we begin to wrap up our conversation, Iya, what's the next thing that we should do? Especially, as I said, with Engineer Adebayo's case, it was really just fortunate that she was able to somehow, her phone recorded the conversation. Sexual harassment by its very nature it's not the type of crime that one can really get hard evidence for many times when it occurs. And so you often find that it becomes a question of whose account do we believe? And then you now find people trying to assassinate the character of the victim to say that, oh, well, because he or she did this, he or she has a history of having done this, then, or he or she is regarded as promiscuous. Sometimes they even bring the victim's sexual history into question as a way to prove that she cannot possibly be a victim. So all of this is because it is often a matter of someone's word versus another person's word. How then can justice be served in many of these cases? Because not everyone is going to have a phone that will record the conversation. These kind of sexual advances are often made as casual remarks. So how can, we move forward with this barrier in place? Yeah, if you heard my question, please go on.
I heard your question. So let me say this. Let me answer the viewer. Okay. Let me answer the viewer that spoke about Senator Natasha not having a good case. Now, I want to say this. This is a very dangerous and harmful, statistically unfounded view that he has. We must focus on the overwhelming reality of, underreporting and support victims or survivors instead of amplifying damaging stereotypes. This issue about Senator Natasha is a visible issue. It has gained a lot of traction because she's a sitting senator within the National Assembly, and she's just one out of the 3 senators that we have in the Senate. One out of 3 female senators we have in the Senate. So there is the negative sides and the positive sides of putting cases in the court of public opinion. because Senator Natasha has not given physical evidence to the court of public opinion, does not mean that she does not have her evidence in place. She is currently in court, and she has her lawyers, her advisors, her consultants that are working with her to ensure that if she's speaking truth to this issue, then justice will be served. But they also want her to be careful in sharing her evidence. There are some things that you have to allow the courts to do. And so I think that they are being very careful with what they put out there. That is why most of the things she has said, they are hearsay for now. But it doesn't invalidate her truth. So for you to sum it up and say that you are supporting Engineer Adebayo's case because there's a recording of it, you shouldn't invalidate Senator Natasha's case. Or you shouldn't, limit it to the facts because she's just making hairstays here and there. She's pursuing this thing both legally, both also in the National Assembly, and she's using other forms of defense. So please let us be objective when we're speaking to these issues. Let us ensure that we practice, fairness, even in terms of the accuser or the alleged perpetrator. Because again, reiterating what you said, sexual harassment, when it comes to physical evidence, it is quite difficult. But then we have to ensure that we use trauma-informed approaches. So fairness includes protecting the rights of both the survivor and also the perpetrator, while ensuring justice is not hindered by institutional power dynamics, while ensuring that we do not empower the culture of silence. We do not empower the culture of victim blaming. So this is what I have to say. This is what I have to say.
Okay. All right. We're ending our conversation now, but in a minute, what words would you like us to ruminate on as we conclude our conversation on sexual harassment in public institutions?
In conclusion, I want to say this, that we need to make sure that we empower survivors, we empower victims. We need to make sure that we support everybody that brings an allegation. Yes, I understand, and we all understand that there are cases of false allegations, but those are rare. When a person brings a situation, let us be able to listen. Let us be able to ensure that we do not violate the dignity and the rights of that individual. Let us ensure that we address these issues appropriately. And we also have to all practice survivor-centered approaches. Basically what I mean by that is, if a situation of a sexual violation has occurred, and whatever the outcome is, let us ensure that we hear from the survivor what next steps to take or what necessary steps to take on behalf of that survivor. That is how you build a system or you build a case where you are safeguarding that survivor or that victim. And let us also understand that the issues of sexual violations can happen to any of us. So we have to be empathetic, we have to be patriotic as citizens of this country. Thank you very much. And
thank you, Iya Bawa Pyiki, Esquire, from Gender Mobile Initiative. She's the Partnerships and Compliance Lead there. Thank you so much for joining us on Panorama this morning. We do hope that the ICPC investigation will eventually yield something more positive, something more just in the case of Engineer Adebayo's allegation of sexual harassment against the Vice Chancellor of FUOYE, Professor Abayomi Fashino. But thank you. We'll have a commercial break. We'll take that. When we come back, at the time we have left, we'll check out the newspapers. Please stay with us. I'll be right back.
Don't dare touch that dial. It's Splash, your integrity station.
Ìyá Lanre, kí ló dé tó ń jẹ ìpẹ́ tó báyìí?
Ẹ wọ́n sún mi jàre, ẹ̀yin náà ìwògbà tá ti ń sọ fún yín kárábà sílíndà. Aṣọ títí náà, báwọn ohun èlò tó ń lona ní pálọ̀ gbogbo ló ti bàjẹ́ tán.
Àbá, ṣé bí o mọ̀ pé kì í ṣe ẹ̀bi tèmi náà kẹ́? Mi ò lówó kan lọ́wọ́ tí mo lè dálẹ̀ fún gbogbo nǹkan wọ̀nyí lẹ́ẹ̀kan ṣoṣo. Bàbá Lanre, ìdílé ń dára yín láàmú sí nígbà tí sídìkì ẹ̀ wà nílẹ̀. Níbi tẹ́ ẹ ti lè ṣètò san díẹ̀díẹ̀ fún onírúurú nǹkan èlò fún inú ilé. Tara yín kódà tó fi dórí ọkọ̀ rírà àti bẹ́ẹ̀ bẹ́ẹ̀ lọ. Láì ní owó èlé kankan lórí, láì sì ní gbó lérí ohunkóhun tẹ́ ẹ bá rà níbẹ̀. Ẹ lè ṣètò san díẹ̀díẹ̀ yín fún gbèdéke oṣù 12 tàbí 40 ọ̀sẹ̀. Múlẹ̀ ìrọ̀kẹ̀. Gbogbo àwọn ohun èlò tó wà nínú ilé mi. Díẹ̀díẹ̀ sídìkì ẹ̀ ni mo fi kọ́ wọn jọ. Ẹ̀tún wa iPhone ọwọ́ mi yìí. Ẹ̀yin kàn lọ sí Google Play Store tàbí iOS App Store yín kí ẹ kàn sí ojúpọ̀ ìtọ̀nà sídìkì ẹ̀. Kí ẹ lè bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí ní rajà nílànà sanwó díẹ̀díẹ̀.
Baálé mi, sídìkì ẹ̀ yìí gangan lohun tí a nílò.
Báwo kan gbogbo nǹkan ló wà ní kẹ́. Download app sídìkì ẹ̀ láti bẹ̀rẹ̀ sọ díẹ̀díẹ̀. Ọ́fíìsì sídìkì ẹ̀ wà ní Public Place, Kẹ́ǹtàn Lọ́kọ́, lọ́jà Ìtòkú nítòsí Access Bank, Ṣàpọ̀n, Abẹ́òkúta, Tẹ́kìtẹ́ lórílẹ̀‐èdè Nàìjíríà là ń tajà wa dé 07074542992.
Sídìkì ẹ̀ make life easier.
Ìrì òwúrọ̀ Jerusalem Jordan bí Olúwa ṣe pa láṣẹ fún bàbá tẹsímọ́nì wípé kí wọ́n máa lọ gbàdúrà fún oníbòjúbò ènìyàn ní Jerusalem àti Jọ́dánì.
Bẹ́ẹ̀ni o, látòrí òkè testimony prayer mountain kò tó wá sẹ́rù Abẹ́òkúta ní Nàìjíríà láwọn ti máa gbàdúrà. Bá a ṣe ń gbéra ìrìn àjò mímọ́ lọ sí Jerusalem àti Jọ́dánì. Àṣẹ Olúwa ní lóòótọ́ o. Àwọn tó ti ń gbà wòlíì Ọlọ́run Prophet Dr. Akande Adéọlá bàbá testimony ìrìn àjò ẹ̀mí mímọ́ yìí ń lólè ròyìn. Bí wọ́n ṣe ń gbàdúrà gbàrí sí ayọ̀ kíákíá. Láwọn ibi tó ṣe kókó tó dárúkọ nínú Bíbélì. Láwọn ẹ̀rí kọ́ngbẹ́kọ́ngbẹ́ tó fojú wọn sí jáde gbangbangba gbogbo ìgbà. Gbọ́ irú ogun wo ló ń jà tí ó fẹ́? Àwọn ìlàkọjá wo ló ní tí ó fẹ́ lọ́kàn balẹ̀? Ó yá jájọ lọ gbàdúrà ní Jerusalem àti Jọ́dánì pẹ̀lú bàbá testimony kó wọ́n ṣẹ́. Hotel accommodation ibi tó rẹwà la máa dé sí. Bẹ́ẹ̀ la máa jẹ oúnjẹ mẹ́ta lójúmọ́. Ó ti yá báyìí ẹ̀ tètè máa bọ̀ wá gba fọ́ọ̀mù kẹ́ forúkọ sílẹ̀ 0902-845-5553 tàbí 081-7577-0000.
Ẹ bá ń gbọ́ oyíbírí àjáde mọ́tò ńlẹ̀ ó yá ẹ bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí ní gbélé yín rìn fojú yín ó ká gbogbo ohun tó ń lọ nínú ọgbà ó yá ẹ bọ́ lọ́wọ́ ẹlẹ́gìrì kéèyàn ó wà lájò kákan ẹni ó mọ̀ ṣe kílòkílò kò yẹ kó rí bẹ́ẹ̀ ẹ kàn sí iléeṣẹ́ link shubin tí wọ́n wá install link CCTV camera kí gbogbo ilé yín ká gbogbo ohun tó ń ṣẹlẹ̀ nínú ilé sọ ìtajà ilé epo ilé ìtura tàbí ilé iṣẹ́ tẹ̀ ẹ̀ dálẹ̀ lẹ́ẹ̀máa wò lórí ẹ̀rọ ìbánisọ̀rọ̀ yín link CCTV camera tẹ̀ ẹ̀ bá ń gbọ́ yíbírí òun náà ló ń jẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ torí gbogbo igun ilé ni ó mọ̀ yíbírí wò yíká kámẹ́rà méjì ọ̀tọ̀ọ̀tọ̀ ló bá dé pẹ̀lú solar panel ló bá dé 24 hours ló fi ń ṣiṣẹ́ kò lè kú 110,000 naira ló bá dé báyìí o ó lulẹ̀ ẹ kàn sí iléeṣẹ́ link shubin nítòsí NNPC ó fẹ́ dojúkọ géètì àbáwọlé OOPL Abiola Way lábẹ́òkúta 0814-491-6204 link CCTV camera ó yíbírí.
tá a bá ń sọ̀rọ̀ ice block making machine nílẹ̀ yìí ọ̀gá àgbà ni Master Sam Cool Engineering Company Master Sam Cool mọ̀ nípa bá a ti ń ṣe àgbékalẹ̀ ice block making machine láti bẹ̀rẹ̀ dópin àwọn free àti freezer yín tẹ́ ẹ ti lò wọ́n pàtì ẹ lè sọ di ice block making machine bákan náà làwọn ice block machine yín tí kò ṣiṣẹ́ mọ́ tàbí tí kò ṣe bẹ́ẹ̀ ṣe fẹ́ Master Sam Cool á bá yín sọ di tuntun tí ẹ ó tún lò fún àìmọye ọdún lẹ́jẹ̀wọ́n bẹ́ẹ̀ bá ṣe fẹ́ sí tàbí customize ice block pẹ̀lú ìrànlọ́wọ́ Master Sam Cool Engineering Company kò sẹ́ni tí kò nílò ice block ìwọ náà bẹ̀rẹ̀ okòwò ice block lónìí kówó máa wọlé fún ọ Master Sam Cool wà ní 463 Abẹ́òkúta Expressway Ajégúnlẹ̀ bus stop nílùú Èkó tàbí ní 32 Bíúrì Láfẹnwá Abẹ́òkúta tàbí nínú ọjà Láfẹnwá lórí Gbẹ́gi ẹ pè 08066303532 lẹ́ẹ̀kan sí 08066303532.
Una sabia mo fini interior. Oga pata the top for luxury imported furniture. Now we be baba.
Yes, so my people, Fimi Interior don't open biggest Ogbonge furniture showroom for Ogun State with the luxury imported furniture. Quality plus warranty day here. 20% discount on all our furniture will land from Obodo Yimbo. Ẹ̀dínwó 20% fún gbogbo oníbàárà wa bẹ̀rẹ̀ láti March 25 the April 25. Fimi Interior Furniture na the home of luxury imported furniture, Turkish sofa, Egyptian royal furniture, Italian contemporary furniture, all for chicken money. Fimi Interior Furniture ti já kọ̀ǹtínà tuntun pẹ̀lú àwọn àjà àbálẹ̀ àwòdàmí ẹnu furniture. Dining tó ṣe ṣe dáadáa àgbàyanu tv shell pẹ̀lú àwọn àga tó bá ti jòyè tó bójú rí. alele oya mekuna come enjoy this Ramadan and Easter promo. Visit our office opposite Zenith Bank, Ìsàlẹ̀gbẹ̀yìn Abẹ́òkúta. Sama them on this number 0806-259-1058. Fimi Interior.
Ọ̀gá pátápátá at the top.
Panorama.
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 Panorama on Splash 106.7 FM.
Welcome back. It's 10:03 a.m. This is Panorama on Splash 106.7 FM. My name is Lola Meduteni. Today, we looked at sexual harassment in public institutions by stroke of coincidence, if a sad one or a negative one. We had another sexual harassment allegation, a high-profile one as well, involving a powerful male figure who was said to have sexually harassed his subordinate. Just as a lot of similarities there with the sexual harassment allegation in the National Assembly, although one wouldn't exactly refer to Senator Akpoti Uduaghan as Godswill Akpabio's Senator Akpabio's subordinate, but at the same time, you can't deny that as Senate President, he has certain powers that he can abuse should he choose to. We recapped the details of the sexual harassment case in Fuoye, Federal University, Oye-Ekiti. And, I gave you all the highlights, but I still urge you to go read it yourself and listen to the transcript. Honestly, it is pretty damning evidence. Again, for me, the issue is whether that audio recording is legit. That's it. It's just about authenticating whether that audio recording is legit, whether that truly is a conversation that was had between Engineer Adebayo and the Vice Chancellor, Professor Abayomi Fashino. If both of the identities are confirmed to be real and what they said was confirmed to not have been manipulated in any form, then it's a slam dunk case as far as I'm concerned regarding sexual harassment. But whatever the case may be, let me take the remaining comments on WhatsApp and Facebook. Mr. Biodun says, on the sexual harassment saga, Engineer Adebayo's issue is so unfortunate, and I think it was evident that the panel setup has taken side with the Vice Chancellor. This is a serious case. I think Nigerians should rise up for it and make sure that the perpetrator, the VC in this case, is brought to book. Senator Akpoti Uduaghan's case is a bit confusing and political in nature. Why was she quiet until her seat was changed? Her manner and conduct in plenary was totally condemnable, to really say the truth. But her case needs to be followed up with good facts that will be difficult to knock out. I would like to hear what the court pronouncement is on her matter without any evidence. Anybody can bring allegation against anybody, but until when it is proven, that is when it becomes truth. Hashtag justice for Engineer Adebayo at Fuoye. Now, there are some narratives that I just have to dispute or refute because they are damaging to victims of sexual harassment or sexual abuse in any case. And one of them is that, why did they choose to report it or make it public at a particular time? When you begin to question when they talk about it, there's no time limit on when victims of abuse of any kind, even if it's physical abuse, can come forward to talk about it. And that is largely because abuse of any kind traumatizes the victims in ways that we cannot begin to understand. And people deal with trauma differently. People handle trauma differently. We've all gone through trauma in our lives in various ways. Childhood trauma, trauma inflicted by family sometimes. And sometimes it takes a long time for you to even begin to realize that what happened to you was inappropriate. It was wrong. It takes... The way that abuse is often painted is that, or the way people expect things to happen is in a linear form, that you've been abused, immediately you are like, I've been wronged. I will seek justice. That's not how, I mean, that's what we hope happens, but that's not how it happens. People's character, personalities are complex. Some people do not even have the outspoken nature to even consider reporting. Some of us are more outspoken than others. Some people will first internalize it and blame themselves. The same blame you're casting on them, they'll first blame themselves. And then sometimes they don't realize that what was done was wrong. They don't realize that they are the wronged party. And then, as I said earlier, they don't have confidence in the justice system to treat them fairly. They don't have confidence in the court of public opinion to believe them. They ask themselves these questions and these doubts surface about whether they'll be believed, whether people would assume that they have ulterior motives. And they then choose to keep quiet. And so they could sit on it for a long time until one day, it spills forth. In the case of Senator Akpoti Uduaghan, I can't speak for her as to why she talked about it now, but based on everything that transpired, it was evident that because she didn't just expose what the Senate president allegedly did to her randomly, she made that revelation in an interview where she was responding to what had transpired in the chambers before that, where she had refused to move from her assigned seat. Remember, because people often forget exactly how things went down. She had refused to move from her assigned seat, saying that it was an attempt to silence her and suppress her, that it was part of a calculated campaign by the Senate president to stifle her voice in the Senate chambers, that whenever she would bring forth a matter, he would find some way to always either move on or not acknowledge her or not take her motion. And so she said that she believed that was another way that he was trying to do that. And then to further give context, she then brought that in because it was relevant, that she thought that the reason he was also doing that was because she had rejected his advances. So if you look at that, it does sound plausible. If indeed he did that, it does sound plausible. So let's be careful when we question why victims come forward when they do, please. They already have a lot to contend with. It takes a tremendous amount of courage for them to come forward. So let's not add to that by saying, why did she talk about it now? Why did she say it when it happened? People process things differently. And people that somehow are operating under the assumption that these victims, that it's a walk in the park for them or that they derive some sort of benefit from it. Frankly, given how much backlash, how much she was raked over hot coals by a number of people, would you say that it's something that anyone would willingly sign up for and say, I want to, this is the kind of publicity I want? Where you have like maybe 30% or 40%, a significant number of Nigerians echoing the same sentiments that you are. You think that's something that anyone would say, I willingly want to sign up for this type of treatment? All right. Final comment on Facebook is from Prince AZ, who says, it is so shameful for a vice chancellor of any university to be involved in this nonsense. By now, I expect the vice chancellor to have been arrested and disgraced. Which type of security agencies have we been having in this country? Our judiciary can no longer be trusted. The only way for any Nigerian to get justice is now by exposing your case online, which is so sad. And that concludes our talk on sexual harassment in public institutions. We hope that justice will still be served in both cases. We'll be looking forward to what the ICPC has to say regarding the Foye case. From the Punch newspaper, fuel prices may fall as FEC renews Naira for crude deal. Dangote and NNPCL expected to review prices this week, marketers say. Labour Party split into three factions as Apapa declares himself chair. On brain drain, Nigeria loses 14,815 nurses, midwives to the UK. Buhari says no increase in my physical assets after presidency. Shoyinka says, I'm saddened by happenings in America. What about happenings in Nigeria? Rivers administrator under fire over local government electoral chief's removal. Tinubu hails Jim Ovia after prestigious London honor. From the Vanguard's front page, Nigeria, others face uncertain economic outlook. Yemi Kale. Nigeria needs economic sovereignty, says Nasima Boss. NESG says Nigeria failed to pursue national development. Economy cannot run solely on market principles, Muda Yusuf says. Samande says manufacturers spend 40% of their revenue on energy. ICANN kicks against borrowing for recurrent expenditure. On court order, Pandef lawyers, CSOs, others kick as IBAS appoints local government administrators in Rivers. On election cases, appeal court president, INEC, others seek constitutional review. Federal government says Naira for crude deal continues. Crude oil price crashes puts federal government revenue target in jeopardy. Under 20 AFCON, Flying Eagles return to Abuja to intensify preparations. We begin with the Naira for crude deal that has finally been renewed. On page 19, the federal government has confirmed that the Naira for crude initiative with Dangote and other domestic refineries would continue to be implemented. Confirming this on its X post yesterday, the Federal Ministry of Finance reaffirmed the government's continued commitment to the full implementation of the initiative as directed by the Federal Executive Council. Let's see. Okay. The ministry stated that the crude and refined product sales in Naira initiative is a key policy directive designed to support sustainable local refining, bolster energy security, and reduce reliance on foreign exchange in the domestic petroleum market. It said that the initiative is not a temporary or a time-bound intervention, but it is a key policy directive designed to support sustainable local refining, bolster energy security, and reduce reliance on foreign exchange in the domestic petroleum market. It adds that the initiative remains in effect and will continue for as long as it aligns with public interest and supports the national economy. In a similar story, crude oil price crashes puts 2025 federal government revenue targets in jeopardy. The price of Bonny Light, Nigeria's premium oil grade, yesterday dropped by 5.09% to $59.62 per barrel in the global market, at the backdrop of the ongoing ripples created by the tariff war that has followed the series of tariff hikes announced by the United States of America early this week. The oil price was also hit by the decision of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, and its allies to increase oil production by 411,000 barrels per day in May of 2025. Experts said the development would negatively impact Nigeria's 54.99 trillion naira budget for 2025, which is based on oil price of $75 per barrel and 2.06 million barrels per day. This indicates a massive setback in terms of price and output as the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission puts the output, including condensate, at 1,671,953 barrels per day in February of 2025. This is the danger of putting all your eggs in one basket. When crude alone has the power to determine the country's revenue alone, you're supposed to diversify so that if something unplanned and unforeseen like this were to happen, because what is happening here is purely external politics. I mean, there are some times when, we have our own issues to contend with, but in this case, the price of crude is fluctuating, or rather dropping. It's not just fluctuating, it is dropping because of the global politics we are seeing regarding the tariff war instigated by the USA president. So none of that is within our control, yet we're going to be significantly affected by it. And that is because we have hinged our economic fortunes on a commodity that is subject to external forces and external factors. So now we have found ourselves in this situation. All we can now do is hope that the price stabilizes or begins to climb. Maybe that the president of the USA reverses himself on this tariff war thing that he started, or that, I don't know, that all parties see reason, because the tariff war has not just crippled the oil market, but it has also led to other developments. It has also threatened other developments. There are worries and fears in the manufacturing sector as well, because they'll be significantly impacted by it. Because what it means is that anyone who exports their product to America will now have to, there'll be more tariff will be added to their products before it is sold to the consumer. So the consumer is going to bear the cost, the American consumer. And so the price is going to go up. Say you are exporting your goods for 50 naira. Like you're selling it for 50 naira. After you calculate everything, including your profit margin, it's supposed to be sold to your customer for 50 naira. But the US imposes a certain percentage of tariff on those goods. That means that instead of it being sold to the final consumer for 50 naira, there's now going to be maybe an additional 10 or 20 naira added. So the consumer will be buying it for 60 or 70 naira, which is a lot. So it would mean that many people naturally will not be able to afford it, and then the volume of your export will drop. It will be forced to decline. So it's affecting other sectors, not just the oil sector. But it spells doom for us because, again, our economy just centers itself around oil. So when the fortunes of oil rise, we rise. When it falls, we fall, unfortunately. Okay, more stories from the papers now. Let's see. Next up, we're going to look at Rivers and the condemnation that the sole administrator is receiving for having appointed local government administrators in the state. That's on page 2 of the Punch. You can send in your thoughts, your comments, your reactions to any of the stories in the papers to me on WhatsApp. The new WhatsApp line is 0705 050 1067. 0705 050 1067. You can also comment on the Facebook live stream Splash FM 106.7, or you can tweet at Splash FM 1067. You can call as well. You can call 0817 444 1067, or you can call 0705 050 1067. On page 2, the River State Sole Administrator Vice Admiral Ibok Ete Ebas, retired, came under scathing criticisms on Wednesday following the sacking of the 23 local government caretakers and the head of the River State Independent Electoral Commission. The caretakers were replaced with administrators in the 23 local government areas in the state, while the RCEC chairperson, Justice Adolphus Enebeli, retired, was replaced by Dr. Michael Ode. Ode will work with 6 members, 4 of whom are professors. This came less than 24 hours after a federal high court sitting in Port Harcourt ordered Ibas to appear before it to justify why the court should not grant a motion seeking to stop him from appointing administrators for the 23 local government areas. Ibas's decision was contained in a special government announcement issued on Wednesday by Secretary to the River State Government, Professor Ibibia Warika. Last week, the sole administrator suspended all heads of ministries, departments, and agencies in the state and cancelled all pending procurement and tender processes carried out by MDAs in the state. It said the cancellation became necessary following the Supreme Court judgment and the absence of an appropriation law within the period. Reacting to the appointments, Governor Siminalayi Fubara's essay on electronic media described the development as impunity taken too far. He said Ibas had become a lord unto himself by his actions, especially as a court had summoned him over the appointments. He expressed happiness that the National Assembly has faulted the planned budget preparation that the sole administrator talked about recently. My thing is, if you claim that your reason for declaring a state of emergency suspending the governor and appointing a sole administrator is to avert or correct the truncation of democracy by the governor. You said that the governor had been acting with impunity and been acting in contravention of democratic principles, and you want to correct that. And you're now correcting it by doing the very same things the governor did. So the governor was accused of appointing sole administrators. Okay, well, not appointing sole administrators, but conducting an improperly done local government election. It was said that the local government election he held was not done diligently, did not follow democratic principles and norms. And so it was not recognized by the Supreme Court, and they asked that he immediately remove everyone there. And he did. And he appointed, he reverted them back to the local government administrators before he was suspended. But if that's one of the allegations brought against him, and then you get there, and then you feel that the next thing to do is also to appoint local government administrators. These are people that were not chosen by the people. Is it because his appointment as sole administrator is for 6 months? Is that why he doesn't regard it as enough time to conduct a local government election rather than appointing local government administrators? Because our laws do not recognize any of these administrators, caretaker committee for local governments. Local governments are supposed to be overseen by local government chairpersons who have been elected by the people. So this is an imposition on the people. People did not vote these people in. So if you're saying that you're trying to correct a situation that is anomalous and then you're doing the same thing, isn't that, somewhat, hypocritical? But that's that story on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. Okay, we have a couple more minutes, which is good because I really want to take this story. But we do have this comment sent in by Akorede Camille, who says, the extension of the Naira for Crude initiative by the federal government is one good news that I have been waiting for all this while. Perhaps this would not see the light of day if Mele Kyari was still pulling strings within the corporation. This policy will definitely reduce the country's reliance on foreign exchange and will not only support sustainable local refining, but also create a healthy competition within local refineries, causing PMS prices to drop and also strengthening the Naira. Another thing as well is that even though the Naira for Crude deal has been extended, and that's good, the questions that have been plaguing that deal have still not been answered. That's the question of transparency on both sides. The NNPCL telling us how much they are selling the crude for to Dangote refineries, telling us what the volume of crude they are selling to Dangote refinery in Naira is. And Dangote refinery also being open about its own part of the deal. That's still a question that is yet to be answered on both sides. So yes, it's good that it's been extended, but from inception, from when the Naira for Crude deal was floated to when it was implemented at first, it's a question that's been dogging them and they have refused to answer. Sanitarian Akiola Luarantimi says, sexual harassment has since turned to communicable diseases, thus spreading from a whole House of Senate, whom the host and parasite had to come from Senate House, then to foyer. Can you see how evil and wicked we are? On Akpoti Uduagan and Akpabio saga, if the law has to take its course, Senate President was supposed to leave his seat and be suspended with Senator Akpoti Uduagan, and then allow the committee to take charge of the sexual harassment investigation. Now to foyer, the Vice Chancellor likes his subordinate, the engineer, thus making him to walk straight to her in making sexual advances. This is a married woman, for crying out loud. This cuts across government agencies, even private firms. The bosses will want to have sex with them by force, and if the woman or lady refuses, they may use sledgehammer to deal with them. What has happened to our Gender-Based Violence Act in this country? The committee set up by Foye had to be telling the engineer that she needs to seek the consent of the VC. You can see the type of country we are. They cannot do this in other countries, especially UK, US, Canada, and the like. What a shame. When there's no justice and fairness, the victims at time become helpless. On Ibas, he has turned to demigod in Rivers. An act of autocratic leadership. I believe those that put him there as well can see what is happening. What a shame. Thank you for your comments. Okay, we don't have time for any more calls, so let me just quickly take this story. I really do want to take it. It's the former president, Muhammadu Buhari, saying there's been no increase in his physical assets after presidency. Former President Muhammadu Buhari has advised members of the Progressive Governors Forum to accord importance to the welfare of the people, not themselves. Buhari offered the governors his personal example of leaving office with the same physical assets he had before his presidency. The statement quoted Buhari as calling for a citizen-centric approach, saying leadership presents both challenges and opportunities that, when balanced, would ensure national progress. Honestly, sometimes the former president seems like he's more concerned about the appearance of modesty than modesty itself. Because he has to periodically remind us, so I'm going to my farm in Daura, I'm going to my cows in Daura, my assets did not increase, I only have this and that and that and this. Yeah. Anyway, that's the size of our show today. That's the length and breadth of it for today. We'll be back tomorrow at 8:30, so join us then. It's a fresh issue of the day and fresh stories from the newspapers. My name is Lola Meduteni.